Welcome back to the TrailBLAZER Pod. I'm your host Faye, and each week I bring you stories of Jewish women paving bold paths. Today's guest is Melanie Goldberg, writer, lawyer, and author of Bedtime Stories for Strong Jewish Girls. Shaped by a diverse Jewish upbringing and first-hand experiences with anti-Semitism, Melanie turned to writing as both activism and connection. Her book weaves together stories of strong Jewish women throughout history, created to inspire confidence, resilience, and curiosity in the next generation. In this conversation, we explore how her personal journey led to the book and why these stories matter now more than ever. Let's dive in. Melanie, welcome to the TrailBLAZER Pod. Thank you so much for being here. How you doing?
Good. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, my pleasure. So, listeners who listen to this every week know that I start the same way, which is basically tell me a little bit about you as a child, and it very often explains, the woman that you are today sitting with us. So if you can share what you were like as a young girl, what was little Melanie like, and like how Judaism played a role as a kid.
Sure. So little Melanie grew up in Brooklyn with a mom that was from the Sephardic community and a dad from the Ashkenazi community.
Wow.
Which was really fun to be exposed to so many different cultures and sometimes confusing.
Yeah.
I am a first-generation American on my mom's side, so I was always exposed to immigrants. Three of my grandparents survived the Holocaust, one survived the Farhud, so no stranger to anti-Semitism. For those listeners who may not be aware, because I find that a lot of people aren't, the Farhud was like kind of an outcome of the Holocaust as it overreached into the Middle East and Baghdad, Iraq. And it was like this 3-day October 7th, like pogrom in Baghdad, to the point where until October 7th happened, I thought my grandma was being like
Dramatic.
like dramatic, and then it happened and I was like, oh, you were not being dramatic. So I was definitely no stranger to that. I grew up with red hair and green eyes, which means I used to hear a lot of, we could have hidden you in the Holocaust also. So that's really fun as a 6-year-old.
Oh my gosh.
Also, you also, I think, have blue eyes, blonde hair. You may have heard similar things.
I actually didn't. So I grew up in Borough Park and, so it was very insulated. And so I didn't really communicate with anyone else that didn't look like me. And so I actually didn't hear those comments. And it was only, when I went to college where people were like, I can't believe you're Jewish. You don't look Jewish at all and whatever. I'm like, this never even crossed my mind. So I actually didn't experience that, now that I have the podcast. It's the first time I'm getting, comments on social media. But yeah, I can't thankfully I can't relate when, in my childhood.
That's, also amazing that you're doing this podcast with that upbringing. I feel like I was really exposed to Borough Park, given that I grew up in Brooklyn, but like,
yeah,
this is going to feel really niche, but like I used to see everyone from Borough Park at Kids in Action, which you remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Duh. Always.
It felt like the intersection of Flatbush area and
Ocean Parkway and Avenue P and all the stuff, all the yeah. That's so funny.
So that may have been too niche for your podcast audience, but it's really fun when
no,
someone
it's perfect.
Understands Kids in Action. It's where all the Jews went to play.
So cute.
Okay, so I grew up among stories of anti-Semitism, stories of strong women, because a lot of my family members were like sole survivors of their upbringings, and also a lot of strength. My grandfather escaped the Holocaust and fought in Israel's War of Independence, and was no stranger to other strong women who had helped found the state of Israel. And I found myself asking a lot of questions as a result. I went to a very traditional Jewish day school where one of the like examples of how traditional it was that they would print sheets, like copied pages of the Gemara when we asked to see the Gemara, because they decided we could only hold a Chumash in our hands or a Siddur in our hands, but not a Gemara sheet.
Yeah.
And I found that really astounding, to the point where I felt like I had to respond. And so as a high schooler, I started writing for the Jewish Week had a teen-led newspaper. So the Jewish Week is it doesn't, I think it's mostly defunct now. It's now the JTA, Jewish Telegraphic Agency.
Yeah.
But it had a printed paper, and every quarter it printed something called Fresh Ink. And Fresh Ink was a teen-written, teen-led magazine. And I would write articles that I felt spoke to what I cared about. So one of them was interviewing some Israeli politicians, trying to understand more about the Knesset from a kid's perspective. Another article I wrote that was not controversial, but this one was, where I was like, there are so many different sects of Judaism, each of it has its beauty. So I kind of modeled the article as like, hey, God, it's me, Margaret. And it was just like, Reform has like this nice aspect, conservative Judaism has this nice aspect, Sephardic Jewry have this nice aspect, traditional modern Orthodoxy has this, like Haredi has this. And that got me called into the principal's office because that was not acceptable how I was
But
exploring other types of Judaism. I remember very distinctly after they called me in asking them what I did wrong. Because I was like, I'm just exploring what are good, and like we should always be trying to find the strengths of other Jews to be able to become our full selves as Jews. And that always resonated with me, and it still does, as like it's been like, I don't know, 18 years since I wrote that article. I still feel that way. I think we're all works in progress. I think like part of Judaism is there's 70 faces of the Torah. Like not everyone can do it perfectly, and everyone is kind of portraying their own face, and we're trying to figure this out. My husband doesn't agree with that statement as much. He does think there's like one correct way, but I will still stand by like I'm still figuring it out. I don't know what the correct way is. I'm just trying to figure it out. So I think that is like a summary of my upbringing, where like I always wanted to ask questions. I always wanted to write, and I always wanted to find my inspiration. I think life is really long and hopefully really long, and you always have to believe life is long, where you can keep pivoting throughout your life, but you also have to believe that life is short and you have to actually do.
I've never heard anyone say that, because I do, in my brain, I'm dealing a lot with like, I had my father's side, his parents died really young of cancer, both of them, and their siblings. And so I've always seen life as like, it really like, it ends, and when I was little, I was like 40 was so old to me. And now I'm turning 30 and I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, there's a whole world ahead. So I'm always dealing with both of exactly what you just said, but you said it so beautifully, where it's like, I have so much time to still accomplish. Like, I don't have to live in, this is going to be the end, but also at the same time, we don't know when it's going to end, and we have to basically live every day like it's our last. But I love how you share that. But I also love that at such a young age, you were like tapping into those questions. And I also relate to that a lot, not necessarily with Judaism in the way you did, but like those big existential life questions. And I remember feeling I don't know if you experienced this, but like so different than my peers. Like, even though I always had friends and I was popular, I always felt like no one really got me, because I was like, they're just playing outside and I'm just sitting here with all these massive questions that I don't think I should be thinking about at this age. So it made me feel different. Did it make you feel different?
Yeah. I mean, I was always very different from my peers. It was hard in high school. I had a great group of friends also, but I definitely felt like, okay, I'm having these questions. There's a reason I found an outlet in writing.
Yeah, me too. It's really funny.
I've always been a writer. I think it's easier to get. I like really want to encourage. My oldest is only 5. She's only learning how to write now, but like I want her to write with a pen and paper when she's older, because I do think that's the way you get your feelings and start to formulate your thoughts. I did a lot of like creative writing as a child, where instead of taking notes in class, I would like pass around. My friends from high school would laugh at this, but like I used to pass around my stories and let people like read parts of it as I was writing them, and then my teachers would figure that out and like want to confiscate it. I was like, but I do well on your exam, so I don't. But it was how I got through high school, and it's I think what helped me get to write the book I wrote. I think without writing throughout your life, you can't develop that skill.
So cool. And that's like going to bring us full circle, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So when you were thinking about college or your future career, what did you envision? Was it writing? Was it something else?
I thought I'd be a journalist. I was
Okay.
like very adamant,
Yeah.
I am going to be a journalist. I like to say I was the child of 9/11. I was 10 when 9/11 happened, and you could see it from my school.
Mm.
And so I remember seeing it, and I remember being just old enough. I had an 8-year-old sister. She was only 2 years younger than me. She didn't quite understand. So I think I was just old enough to understand like something huge had happened. And I wanted to tell stories of how to stop terrorism. Like I feel like you and I grew up around the same time. We saw the wars happening overseas and we're like, doesn't seem effective. There's still terrorism happening. And so I wanted to figure out how to expose the stories and to keep writing about those things. And then while I was in college, I realized journalism was dead, which was really a fun realization. And had this reckoning of like, okay, journalism has turned into public relations. It's not really something I'm super interested in because I don't want to have to tailor stories. I want to be able to find the nitty-gritty. Podcasts were not a thing yet, but I do
Right.
think podcasts are like a reinvention in some ways of
Yeah.
journalism. And through a few other incidents, I realized that my 15-minute sound bites as a journalist weren't going to get the point across. And so I wanted to figure out how to work within the law to try to practice some sort of counterterrorism finance, because I found that the story wasn't really that terrorism existed. It was that they were using financial systems to pay terrorists to commit horrible acts. Like it was just crazy that like banks just kept getting fined and no one was stopping it.
Yeah.
Like fines are pennies. I worked at a bank. Fines are pennies for these banks. Like it's just not working. Like they'll keep doing it because they can still make a lot of money off it. So I remember thinking along those lines, that I didn't want to just have that 15 seconds or 15 minutes of fame rather for the story. I wanted to actually do something that was impactful.
Okay, I know this interview is about you, but I'm just relating to what you're saying because I also started college as a creative writing major and I was going to go into journalism. And then I switched to sociology and I ended up studying criminology and counterterrorism. And so there's a lot of overlap there. I was, my master's was in security studies and counterterrorism. And so I'm just, I'm finding it cute that we have a lot of, similar passions.
Yeah.
It's funny coming from Brooklyn and then we, got all,
Yep.
yeah. So in 2013, you were asked to leave an anti-Israel forum in Brooklyn College, right? And I know when I sent you these questions, you're like, whoa, you went all the way back, but it's clearly very integral to your story because as you're saying, even as a little kid, you were thinking about those big questions of, Judaism. And then you heard the stories about anti-Semitism and here we are 2013. And then you wrote your book and it's just like a clear theme throughout your life. Can you share what happened there and how that shaped your experience with anti-Semitism and experience as a Jew at that time?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. I have not talked about this in so long. So that's
Wow.
why when you had sent me those questions, I was like, wow. So while I was in college, I felt a strong pull to the idea that I grew up on a lot of Israeli history, because my grandfather had fought in the War of Independence and my mom was born there in the late 1950s. And I felt like a lot of Jewish day schools cheerlead Israel in a really empty way. It's kind of like cheerleading Judaism in a really empty way. If you go to Hebrew
Interesting.
school often, you're just saying rah rah Judaism and there's no substance behind it. I also think like Jewish day schools do rah rah Israel and there's no substance. You don't know the history, you don't know the good parts, and you don't know the bad parts.
Wow.
My goal in college was to bring education to campus. And so I partnered with a couple of different nonprofits and tried to find people that would give more substance behind the stories. Part of that also meant that I felt compelled as somebody who was educated in the good and bad parts of Zionism to attend SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine events, and kind of be that counter voice. Because I felt like I knew some of the bad things, and yet that didn't discount the need or like legitimacy of the state. Like I felt like the question was just wrong. So I became very well known in college as somebody who would attend these SJP events. You can't tell on this video, but I am really short. I am 5'1".
Okay.
And I was really petite in college as well. And I was like stupid enough that I wasn't scared of almost anything. And
Yeah.
and
That's what college is for, right?
I also really miss that 20-year-old Melanie. And so when I was a senior in 2013, so after being well known with SJP, we had a very active SJP, as you can imagine, at Brooklyn College. It still is pretty active. It's just a diverse city. So in 2013, SJP got the political science department of Brooklyn College to endorse and sponsor an event bringing in Omar Barghouti, the founder of the BDS movement, and Judith Butler to campus. And the issue with SJP getting a department and the college to bring these speakers to campus is that it was one-sided, but they were using New York City tax dollars and New York State tax dollars to pay them because these are public universities. So a couple of people had written articles. Alan Dershowitz is a famous alumnus of Brooklyn College, and he wrote how this was like contrary to what the college was allowed to do with tax dollars and funding. It blew up a bit in the media, which is probably why you found some articles, at least before the event, to the point where the president of the college called me and asked me to be the counter voice at this event. 21-year-old Melanie was going to be the other side of this like PhD holding person. And because 21-year-old Melanie was stupid, she said yes.
Brave.
Brave, stupid. And so I made sure to RSVP to the event, and I planned to go alone. The head of the Hillel decided that little 5'1" Melanie should not go to this event alone, and had two of, at that point, they were just acquaintances of mine. Now they're very good friends. Very large men accompany me to this event. And they were both wearing kippot on their heads. And we got to the table, the security, and they said we weren't on any list. And I was like, that's ridiculous. You asked me to be the counter voice to this event. Like, I have to be on a list, and these are the people I'm bringing in with me. And after some amount of back and forth, the vice president of the college escorted us in. We sat down. The event had already started. And I took out some sheets where I was going to jot down notes and also like provide, like, again, I was here to educate, like some counterpoints, like the fact that Omar Barghouti got his PhD at Tel Aviv University, and he now endorses the BDS movement, which says like ostracize Israel for everything. About 10 minutes after we sat down, one of the heads of SJP, who was not a student at Brooklyn College, but he was the head of Brooklyn College SJP, came over to me and said, give me all your sheets. And I looked at him and said, no, I'll give you one. And he said, give me all your sheets or I'll have you forcibly removed from this event. And I said, you can't do that. And so he went over to security, and they came over to me, and the two kippah-clad men on either side of me, and said, you need to leave this event. Oh my God. And I said, you can't do this. But I also made a conscious choice not to make a stink. And so I went over to the vice president, who had just escorted us in, and said, I thought I was supposed to be the counter voice. And she was like, well, it's their event and they're calling the shots.
Wow.
Obviously, it was not, like, many levels of not true. But instead of a causing event, I decided to leave the event with the two men, walk to the Hillel, type up a press release that this was going. I knew there was a lot of press there because there had already been a swirl in the media about this. I typed up a press release and stood outside the event and handed it out to every single person who left the event. And I said, this is going to be the story tomorrow. It's not that there was this event happened. It's going to be that they kicked out the Jews out of this event.
Yeah.
The next morning, I opened the papers, and Brooklyn College released a statement to counter me and said I had made a stink at this event, and that's why I was rowdy, and that's why I was forcibly removed. What Brooklyn College didn't know was that I had had a non-Jewish friend, and I don't know why I did this. But I had a non-Jewish friend in the front row, and I asked him to put his iPhone on record.
Wow.
And so he had recorded the entire event. And so when
smart.
I still have no idea why I did this.
Because you're a journalist.
Still today. But I'm so happy I did.
Yeah, so smart.
So when they released that statement saying I was rowdy, I released the recording to the media. And so that's when more politicians got involved, law firms got involved, and it became a lot bigger story because not only had they kicked the Jews out of the event, but they lied about it. And they also could, like, if we're going to use legalese, they like committed libel against me. I was not rowdy. I did not disrupt this event. So that's also one of the reasons I chose to go to law school. Was just I got much more exposed to the legal system and realized we needed more people who could navigate it properly. I did not, let me be clear, did not navigate it properly for this specific incident and have my own thoughts on like the Jewish organizations that exist today to try to help students. Like I find my story to be so minor compared to what most students are experiencing right now and into like on college campuses. It's almost tragic. Like if the legal system had been used properly, there would be a lot more recourse for Jewish students when something like this happens. And there just isn't. And it's been 13 years now. We're in 2026, 13 years later. And I feel like it's just gotten worse, not better.
That was my exact thoughts when you were talking about this, because after October 7th, I had some students come on here and share their experiences. And I couldn't believe it. You know, I haven't been in college or school for so long that, you know, you kind of are oblivious to what's going on. But what I was hearing was absolutely mind-blowing. But then to hear that this was already happening in 2013 is like, what? How has nothing changed? It's only gotten worse. So I want to ask you if you can give advice to students today. You know, you mentioned you didn't handle it right. I don't know what do you mean by that? How should you have handled it? And what advice would you give to students if they are experiencing something similar?
You need to advocate for yourself and make sure that lawyers don't know the right answer for your case. Lawyers are trying to find the easiest resolution and the most streamlined way, and they don't have a lot of time to spend on pro bono matters. They just don't. They're not getting paid, so they can only put in so much effort toward your case, whether that is a place, any nonprofit, or it's a private law firm. I was represented by a nonprofit and a private law firm, and the nonprofit had accepted a settlement on our behalf that I would never have accepted.
Wow.
Let me be clear, it was not a monetary settlement, but not that that should matter.
Yeah.
I do think that like one of the reasons why anti-Semitism has proliferated on these college campuses is that a lot of these nonprofit law firms, not like legal, I wouldn't even call them law firms, like legal advocacy organizations, don't actually follow through. They're in it for their little 15-second soundbite and saying, look, we've like pursued this on behalf of these students. Look how great it is. And they don't actually follow through. I think if you're a student who has, it's a lot of grit, like it's dragging yourself through years of back and forth. Like it took me at least 2 years to get to a result I wasn't even happy with. If you have the grit, pursue it and hold them accountable. Like this country still has protections. They're supposed to be protecting students and they're supposed to be allowing for certain students to flourish. And right now that is just not happening. And if you don't advocate for yourself, it won't happen.
Yeah. I just find it so interesting that you're saying that, because I think you did so much more than a lot of people would have done. Like you were smart enough to have someone record it. You were smart enough to write up the press release. Like it sounds like you did like almost everything you possibly could from my point of view. But I know that, you know, you experienced it and you now have the legal background and you understand it from a different perspective. So that's why I think it's important to hear from people like you who not only understand it as somebody that's educated, but also somebody that went through it.
Yeah, I genuinely think like we had the tools because of the wherewithal we had the tools to get our story and our side out, and we had the evidence on our side, and like the law firms just and the organizations just either don't have the manpower and resources or do not follow through on effective change. And I like challenge them. I've worked with them in the past, and I have challenged them to try to show me what effect, like positive effect they have had in the last 13 years, and they cannot point to anything that has been a positive change that they have implemented. So it's upsetting and disappointing. Like,
Yeah. But I think a big thing is to know that people like you have gone through it and you've experienced it and you're trying to make it, work in a better way, hopefully. Even that I think is helpful for young students. I think when you go through something like that, you feel very alone and isolated, especially if the place where you're supposed to be able to, have discourse and discussions, and it's just not allowing you to. So thank you for sharing that. I know we went way back, but I think it's important.
no, it's fine.
But so you did end up going to law school. Can you just give me a little blurb of like where your career path took you? Because we're going to talk about, Google and what happened there, but just a little background.
Yeah, sure. So I went to law school with the goal of being a prosecutor in the counterterrorism finance way. On that path, I worked at Rikers Island my first summer doing investigative work there. It was eye-opening. We don't need to go into that now. I like still talk about that experience. It was eye-opening. And then my second summer, I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Baltimore, doing high-level prosecutions, which also was itself eye-opening just because, like, high-level prosecutions meaning of Baltimore gang members, and it's just, like, eye-opening whenever you have a conversation with someone with that background. I also worked at the New York State Attorney General's office investigating fraud sham charities, which was supposed to give me somewhat of the finance background to understand what fraud was being committed. We did a huge investigation on the claims conference. We also did one on Trump University. That was also really fun. One of the reasons I chose the law school I went to was because of all the experiential learning I could do, like the clinical work, and it was really, really fun and worth it. I also worked at the Manhattan DA's office while in law school, and really found that I got like all levels of prosecutorial exposure to the point where I was like, I don't want to do this because litigation is not the path I want to pursue. And so I took a pause. I was lucky enough to meet my now husband in my summer in Baltimore. I spent the summer in DC, and we met like my first Shabbat there. Actually, yeah, it was
so
wild.
Sweet.
It was supposed to be my break from dating. I lived in New York. I needed a break.
That's how it happens.
That's how it happens.
Yeah.
So he was pursuing a PhD in Chicago after the summer, and we dated long distance for a year. And then we got married. I moved to Chicago, and I refused to take the Illinois bar. And so I worked at a small law firm that didn't require it for a year. And then I came back to New York and clerked into COVID, and then they couldn't replace clerks at that time. So the judge I worked for, who I loved, still do, asked me to stay on, and I stayed on until I got this job at Google, which is very non-traditional. Usually you have to work in a law firm before you go in-house. I feel very, very lucky that I was able to like turn my clerkship into a job at a great in-house place.
Wow. So I'm going to have to pick your brain another time on all the Rikers Island and all the, talking to gang members, because that's just, I love that stuff. So another time for that. But I want to talk to you about, a lot of the women I talk to on here, we focus on the theme of like pivots and changing and careers and how to deal with that, because I think all of us go through it at a certain point. And you did, open up, I think it was on LinkedIn, about how you were impacted by Google layoffs 2 years ago, and you were just returning from maternity leave, which in itself is like a big change in someone's life. Can you share how you kind of got through that experience and like the resilience you built, and how I just want people to listen so that if they're going through something like this, they can kind of take, a little inspiration from how you dealt with it.
Yeah, so that was a fun period of my life, and I say fun really sarcastically. Um, it was 2023. It was the first time when I got the job at Google, I figured it was gonna be my job for life.
Mm.
Google had never laid anyone off.
Okay.
I love the team I worked for. I love my manager. I felt so lucky. The work I did was really impactful. It was actually doing a lot of counterterrorism finance. I worked for the Google payments team. I was one of the legal leads responding to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In that we cut Russia off from Google Pay in a really quick move.
Wow.
If anyone remembers, like the viral image of a bunch of people in the Moscow rail trying to get home, it's because they primarily used Google Pay to pay for their subways and they couldn't get home. Granted, a lot the war is still happening, so question
Wow.
everything. But it was really impactful work. And then I had my second daughter, and I was on maternity leave, and they gave a great maternity leave policy. And then I came back, um, and within 4 days was laid off. It was the first time Google had done layoffs. It was shocking. I at first did not know what to do.
Yeah.
There were a lot of tears. And then I had already started writing the book. So the book relates to like how I found myself having resilience. I wrote a book about, and this was when I had my first daughter in May 2020. The courts were closed. I was clerking at the time. And I felt like I needed a side project. And I also felt like I couldn't find any book that I wanted to share with my daughter, the strong legacy that she was inheriting.
Wow.
And that goes back to like wanting substance behind your Judaism. Like I felt like I went to a Jewish girls' day school and like didn't know half the
Right.
stories that I was now discovering as a new Jewish mother of a girl.
Yeah.
I felt like if I was going to give my daughter the substance she needs to be a proud Jew, whatever that looks like for her, I needed to find a way to convey that to her so that she wants to seek it out on her own.
Yeah.
And so I started writing this book. Then the courts reopened and I was busy again. And then I had my second and was writing a little bit there, but not as much because now I had two little kids under the age of 3. And then I got laid off. And I took a lot of strength from the idea that I was going to spend a couple hours a day. I am not made to be a stay-at-home mom. I know people that are,
Yeah.
and I give them a lot of credit. Does not work for me.
Yeah.
So I knew that I wanted to find another job, and that I was going to find another job because so many women in the book did this before me. Like there are women in there who couldn't travel on conferences because pregnant women were banned. There were certain women who
Wow.
worked in a lab where they didn't have a women's bathroom, and so they actually had to go home in the middle of the day because they didn't have a usable bathroom. Women have faced so much throughout the years that this was just like another link in that chain. I felt like I had to spend a couple hours a day interviewing and applying to jobs, and then the rest of the time finishing my book. And like I did that. I spent like a few hours a day, and if you spend all your free time, you cannot like possibly land a job. Like if you spend all your free time like just applying all the time, you need to have a side project. And I stand by that even now. Like I'm working at another tech company now, and I think you always need a passion project.
Yeah.
You need something that you find impactful for your life that isn't just your work and isn't just your family. It can be something minor and it can be something major. I feel so lucky that I had writing as an outlet,
Yeah.
that became that's my passion project. I do think that without writing, I would have gone into a deep, dark hole. And also without knowing all these women's stories, I think I would have also fallen into a deep, dark hole. So I think layoffs happen. I think they're much more common now. I think my attitude to any job I have now is that it's fun. Make sure it's fun while it lasts.
Yeah.
That's all I would tell anyone looking for a job is like, make sure you're happy and make sure you have a backup. Make sure you're ready for anything that may come your way, but realize that a job is a job. And like, if you want to go to your kid's school play, go. If you want to go on vacation, go, because
Yeah.
your job's not going to back you up. Like, you need to live the life you want to live, and your job's there to fund it and to give you some sense of fulfillment.
Yeah. There's two things I love that you said. One is the have a passion. It's kind of like, when you're looking for a specific dress, you're never going to find it. You need to like take yourself out of that space. And for me, for a long time, I thought I'm a very all or nothing kind of person. And so when I was in something, I was like, this is what I'm doing. And I neglected everything. Like even writing, I didn't write for years because I was just like, this doesn't fit into my life right now. And the second I like switched that in my brain, I became way more fulfilled because I have different, parts of myself that I get to, someone I had on the podcast called the buckets. I get to fill my different buckets. But then the other thing that you said was about how writing about these women, you were standing on the shoulders of these women that came before you. And this is exactly why I asked you this question, because now you can have this kind of like a cycle and you can have other women listen to you and use you as an example. So I just think it's beautiful how, it travels through time and through generations. And yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, me too.
I can go so much into, the rest of your career, JP Morgan, and now you're in high tech and all the cool things, but I want to get more into the book, if that's okay, because we don't have a lot of time. So, you did mention, what inspired you to write the Bedtime Stories for Strong Jewish Girls and why you felt it was, important for you and for your kids. And you highlight 50 Jewish women who, I'm just going to quote, dare to ask questions and stand tall. And so I want to ask you, as a writer, as a Jewish woman, how did you decide like which stories to share? And like, how did you find these stories? Because I feel like, again, also me, like I grew up religious. I grew up, Jewish, proud Jewish. And like, I don't know these stories, which is so sad.
So, yeah. So I realized, okay, if I'm going to write this book, what are the women I want my girls to know? When I was growing up, like purely from the air, I learned about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and
Right.
Golda Meir, both of whom I think are very amazing people, but both come with flaws. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, her Judaism is an anecdote. She was not a very committed, passionate Jew. She was a lawyer, justice, mother, comma Jew. Golda Meir, amazing stateswoman, really not a great mom. Like if you delve more into her personal life. If I'm going to teach my daughters who their examples and their role models should be, I would like to first and foremost share them women who had it all. Like were happy, passionate, involved Jews, whatever that looks like. It doesn't always need to be Orthodox. I'm a modern Orthodox Jew, but it doesn't mean that that is the be all end all. And that had a career, whatever that looks like. And it is a diverse array of like achievements throughout this book, which was very important to me. Like I wanted them to know like the world is their oyster. They can be whoever, whatever. And also women who wanted children. They wanted to pass on that legacy. Doesn't mean that they had children. There are plenty of really strong women who wanted children and had to find other ways to pass on that legacy because they didn't end up having children, whether it's Sarah Schenirer or Nechama Leibowitz. Like, I make sure that they are highlighted as well because I do think they did have this strong drive to pass on Judaism to the next generation. So that's kind of how I did it. I also wanted to make sure there was a diversity of eras. So I wanted to throw in some biblical stories. I wanted to throw in people throughout different centuries, whether it's a 14th century Kurdish rabbi or like the woman who printed the Vilna Shas in the 1800s. Like I just felt like very strongly that it had to go across eras and generations and also should be more diverse. I found like growing up kind of in with a foot in both the Sephardic and Ashkenazi world, there are so many books. There's a lot more now, but so many children's books just talk about Ashkenazi Jewry. End up just talking about the Holocaust, and I didn't want my book to just have that. Like we're bringing Jewish joy here.
Yeah. I love you really had a strategy behind this. Every good writer, journalist has that. I'm curious. So like many of the women in this book, they challenge the status quo. Like what do you hope that, your daughters or young readers will take away from that and, implement it in their life?
I think like it's really important for them to look at this book and realize that this is just a tidbit. Like, I do 50 stories. Every story has one picture. The story is 1 page long, and it's like written in a once upon a time like fairy tale idea, which I think speaks really well to. I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and now I have a 9-month-old boy who also should read this book.
Yes.
They should know too.
Yeah.
I do think like the idea is to keep asking these questions and to find out more about these women. Like, I hope, like, my sincere hope for my girls is that they look at this book and they're like, oh, I want to learn more about this one. And then look her up. There's so many resources out there now, whether it's ChatGPT. I want them to realize all that is a start, and it's like their critical reading skills are going to have them delve deeper. They're going to find other books out there. The resource I used the most was something called Jewish Women's Archive, which is essentially a Wikipedia platform that is like community sponsored, like community populated, where they can just write about different Jewish women that existed throughout history. I found a lot of people's dissertations, which no one but I did to find out information that would be enough to tell these women's stories. But like, these are a lot of forgotten women, and it felt like I was like bringing them back to life to a degree. But I hope that other women, other girls who read this, other boys who read this, just realize that this is the start of their stories, and like they can look up more. Like, they should want to learn more. Like, we have the internet now.
Yeah, I love that. So, I did have Eliza Levy on my podcast, and we talked about her book, Iconic Jewish Women, amazing woman. And I saw on your Instagram that you guys kind of support each other. And so this is another thing that we talk about as women, is like lifting each other up, not gatekeeping. How is that working for you too, as like kind of being in the same space? And, you're both talking about really amazing Jewish women in history, just like the support there between each other and like not feeling like competitors.
We're not competitors.
Okay.
We're like very much not. I feel like there were 0 books when I was first looking, and now there are a few on the market that are tell the stories of Jewish women. Eliza's great. She's so fun, and she has so much energy. Like, I want to have that much energy always. She is really good at sharing resources and strategy. This is not the first book she's written. This has been her like lifelong mission.
Yeah.
I don't view her as a competitor. I view her as a partner who's helping tell this story. Like, I hate that there is competition, especially in such an industry where like it's Jewish publishing. Like, we have such a niche small market. Let's just all partner together and really work towards publicizing each other's work, especially when we have the same message. Like, for full transparency, I've tried to partner with other women who have written similar books, and they have declined. And that makes me sad, because how can you possibly write a book about strong Jewish women and not support current modern day strong Jewish women that have the same message?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I do as a social media strategy is like try to partner with other women who have written or do something creative, and we can do a giveaway together. There's a new Jewish women series that's coming out, and I'm trying to help them really get more of the word out. But I like made sure to message them when I first discovered them and say, hey, I've done this for like a year now. Well, not even. My book came out in October. Like, I'm happy to include you and start like finding strategy. But Eliza's really great, and everyone should buy her book. Hers is the bat mitzvah version of my book. Mine's for younger kids. So we're just doing the whole life cycle here.
Yes. And this is why I wanted to ask you, because I think it is something that, we deal with. I think sometimes we feel like there's only room for one, and, there really obviously isn't. And I think if you support each other, there's only room to grow with each other, because you can tap into each other's, like you're saying, customers, audience, whatever it is. I want to end off by asking you, if your children were to hear one bedtime story of you and yours, what would you want that to be?
There's a woman I write about that I actually toyed with not including. Her name is Helene Kazis Benatar, and she is a Moroccan woman who ended up helping a lot of families in World War II emigrate. She was also the first female Moroccan-born lawyer.
Mm.
And she also tried to become a nurse during World War II because she thought her efforts would be better there. In the end, she just like ended up acting as a translator. She failed horribly at being a nurse. And I find that I constantly go back to thinking about her story, which is why I ended up including her, because I felt like she pivoted constantly. And that is what I'm finding in my life. That like I think it goes back to there where like the start of this conversation where we talked about having to pivot and kind of
Yeah.
understanding that life is long but also short.
Yeah.
I hope that like if my kids one day, I like don't think this is likely. There are a lot of amazing women right now. It's not me.
Hey.
No, look, I think I've done a lot with my life and I'm really proud of the things I've accomplished, but I also don't think that I have anything that's special to write a book about quite yet. Maybe it'll get there.
We'll talk about it,
But
Melanie.
we could talk later.
Yeah.
This is what we mean. We need women supporting women.
Yeah.
I hope that they understand that I've pivoted a lot in my life and I kept pursuing what I thought was going to leave an impact and wasn't just for my own personal gain, but was good for the Jewish people and good for humanity as a whole. I think strong Jewish women is good for humanity as a whole.
Yeah. I think what like inspires me about you, and obviously, I started looking into you because of the book, which happened on Instagram, but then I realized how much more there is to you and to your story is that if you take just your career, it's really, really impressive. I work now in tech as well, in financial tech, which again, we have a similarity there.
All the things to talk
Yes.
about.
Yeah, but I also made some pivots. So as a standalone career, I look up to that. But then you add the added layer of you like constantly from a little girl seeking to understand more about the Jewish people and Jewish values and who you are as a woman, standing up for Jewish people and fighting against anti-Semitism. Like you just add that and you just become this like full picture of a woman that I think does belong in a book like you wrote. And so, you can fight me on this, but I'm going to stand by it. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm excited to put the link of your book into the bio and everyone should check it out. And I don't have kids, but when I do have kids, I will have this book with me. And so thank you so much, Melanie. I really appreciate you taking time to sit down with me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.